The billionaire's baby cried nonstop in the restaurant until the waitress's 12-year-old black daughter did the unthinkable. "This child is ruining my business dinner," shouted William Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, with his 6-month-old baby bawling in his arms as customers at the upscale Grand View restaurant turned to stare. "Where's the manager? I need a solution now." Little Emma Sterling had been crying for 40 minutes straight, turning what should have been an $8,000 dinner with Japanese investors into a living nightmare. William had tried everything: expensive bottles, imported toys, even offering money for other tables to move, but nothing worked. "Mr. Sterling, we've already called 3 emergency babysitters," whispered the maitre d' nervously, but none of them have been able to calm her down. At the investors' table, diplomatic smiles were fading into irritation. This was the $50 million deal that would secure Sterling Industries' expansion into Asia. That's when Linda Thompson, a 34-year-old waitress who had been working at Grand View for 6 years, approached discreetly. "Mr. Sterling, I could try." "You?" William interrupted her with a cruel laugh, scanning her uniform with disdain. "Please, I've already paid for professional experts. I don't need amateur advice." Linda stepped back but stayed nearby, her eyes glancing at her daughter Victoria, a 12-year-old sitting in the back with advanced math books and a battered laptop. It was the weekend, her babysitter had canceled, and Linda had no choice but to bring her child along. "What's so special about this kid?" muttered one of the investors in Japanese. William was desperate. His $2 billion empire had started with Asian investors, and this deal could double his worth. But Emma only screamed louder. "Linda," he called again, his arrogance cracking. "You said you could try." "Actually, sir," Linda said calmly, "the one who really understands babies is my daughter, Victoria. She has a special gift." William sneered toward the child, unimpressed. "Are you suggesting I hand my daughter over to a child? A child who shouldn't even be here?" The restaurant manager leaned in. Perhaps it would be better to try anything at this point. Humiliated, William raised his voice so the room could hear.
"Fine.
Bring on this junior consultant. But when it doesn't work, you're both gone. And Linda, consider your job under review." Victoria closed her calculus book, stood, and walked over. At 12, she was already a math prodigy, but few knew it. Her sharp eyes noticed what the adults had missed. The baby's position was uncomfortable. The restaurant was too warm, the cutlery noise overwhelming her senses. "May I?" she asked, holding out her arms. With skepticism, William handed Emma over. "5 minutes, then you're out." But what happened next stunned everyone. Victoria adjusted Emma gently, applied light pressure on her back, and hummed a lullaby her grandmother had taught her. Within 30 seconds, Emma stopped crying completely. The silence was deafening. The baby opened her eyes, focused on Victoria, and smiled. How did you do that?" William stammered. Victoria handed her back with a calm reply. She just needed someone to pay attention. The Japanese investors whispered excitedly, impressed. The dinner could continue. The deal was safe, yet William felt unsettled by the girl's steady, mature gaze. When Linda led her back to her seat, William asked, "What were you studying there?" "Game theory applied to behavioral economics," she answered casually. "I'm analyzing how irrational decisions by powerful people create predictable mathematical opportunities for others." William didn't fully understand, but he knew she was no ordinary child. The next day, however, Linda arrived at work to an icy atmosphere. Manager James Morrison pulled her aside. Mr. Sterling called. He wasn't pleased with what happened. He said it was inappropriate to bring a child into the workplace, and you acted outside protocol by allowing a minor to interfere. Interfere. Linda shot back bitterly. She solved a problem experts couldn't solve. James sighed. Sterling spends tens of thousands here. He demanded your daughter never appear again. He's even threatening to move his events elsewhere. Over $200,000 a year in revenue. The humiliation burned. 6 years of loyal service, and she was punished for her daughter's brilliance. Meanwhile, Victoria was at the library, digging through Sterling Industries records. Labor lawsuits, mass layoffs, benefit cuts, abusive tactics. William had avoided real consequences through expensive lawyers. Interesting behavioral pattern, she muttered, jotting notes. At school, she was distracted. Victoria, are you struggling with the exercises? Asked Miss Chun. No, teacher. I'm thinking about game theory and asymmetric power situations, when one person has disproportionate resources and uses them to control others. At lunch, she scribbled equations on a napkin, watching classmates form cliques. It's all about timing and information, she murmured. Power is just information applied at the right moment. When she got home, she found her mother at the kitchen table, shoulders heavy with worry, and realized their lives were about to change forever. Still wearing her restaurant uniform and looking defeated, Linda sat silently when her daughter asked softly, "Mom, did something happen?" Linda looked at her 12-year-old who spoke like an adult and thought like a scientist, and her heart tightened because how could she explain that the world was unfair to exceptional people like Victoria? "Mr. Sterling didn't like what happened yesterday," she said carefully. "He asked you not to come to the restaurant during my shifts anymore." Victoria was silent for a long moment, processing the information, and when she finally spoke, her voice was colder than Linda had ever heard. "He felt threatened." "No, Mom. That's exactly it. He felt threatened because a 12-year-old black girl solved a problem he couldn't solve with all his money and power, and now he's using his economic influence to punish our family." Linda saw something in Victoria's eyes that frightened her, an intensity far too mature for a child, and then came the chilling words. "Mom, did you know Sterling Industries has been sued 5 times for abusive labor practices, and that William Sterling personally laid off 300 employees during the pandemic just to keep his executive bonuses?" Linda stared in shock. "How do you know that?" "Research," Victoria replied simply. "It's all public information, just like the fact that he owes $2 million in back taxes and is under investigation for tax evasion." "Victoria, where are you going with this?" Linda asked nervously, noticing the notebook filled with numbers, graphs, equations, and clipped articles. "People like William Sterling commit injustices because they believe there will be no consequences," Victoria said with calm precision. "They count on their victims lacking resources to fight back." Linda shivered. "Victoria, you're scaring me." "There's no need to be afraid, Mom," she said with a measured smile. "I'm just studying patterns. You know, there's a mathematical theory called Nash equilibrium. It shows that in any strategic game, eventually all players settle into strategies where no one can improve their position alone. The problem is, William Sterling thinks he's playing a game with all the advantages, but he doesn't realize he changed the rules by putting me in the equation." That night, while Linda slept, Victoria stayed awake on the borrowed school laptop, mapping William Sterling's financial, social, and professional structure with the patience of someone who learned very young that underestimated people always hold a hidden advantage. They are invisible until the exact moment they choose not to be. As she worked, an idea took shape. Not revenge, but an equation where William Sterling's arrogance became the variable that would destroy him, because every system, no matter how powerful, has points of vulnerability, and Victoria had just found his blind belief that a 12-year-old black girl could never be a threat. 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, Victoria was back at her sanctuary, the public library, this time with Professor David Kim, a retired mathematician who was astonished at the graduate-level equations she had filled across pages. "Victoria, have you really built a mathematical model to predict corporate behavior?" he asked, stunned. "Not exactly predict," she replied coolly, "more like identifying systemic vulnerabilities in power structures built on arrogance and prejudice." She showed him her folders, 5 years of public financial reports cross-referenced with lawsuits, layoffs, and executive habits. "Sterling follows an almost perfect pattern," she explained. "He makes the same judgment errors every 18 months, always underestimating people he thinks are beneath him, and he documents it in ways that can be traced." Meanwhile, in his office, William Sterling had forgotten the girl and focused on his biggest deal yet. "The Yamamoto delegation will arrive next week," his assistant informed him. "They insist on dining at Grandview again." William smiled. "Perfect. That place knows its audience. No unnecessary interference this time." But what he didn't know was that his arrogance had created an opening Victoria was already exploiting, because Yamamoto Corporation held strict values on ethics and responsibility. "Professor Kim," Victoria said, "how would you ensure certain information reached the right people at the exact right time?" The professor looked concerned. "Victoria, that sounds elaborate." "I'm just applying game theory," she said evenly. "Power used through prejudice always creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited." And over the next 2 weeks, small cracks began to appear in Sterling's world. An investigative journalist started asking questions about labor practices, dismissed as noise. Former employees began posting comments on his LinkedIn, waved off as bitterness. But then came an IRS audit, focused exactly on the years Victoria had flagged in her analysis. Coincidence, William told his accountant. But in the library, Victoria calmly showed Professor Kim the mounting articles and posts. "How did you orchestrate all this?" he asked. "I didn't orchestrate anything," she answered. "I just identified the pressure points and gave factual information to the right people. The system regulated itself." Then she revealed more. William had a habit of recording executive meetings, often making inappropriate comments, all stored on poorly secured servers. "Victoria, how did you get that?" the professor gasped. "I didn't access anything," she replied coolly. "But when you anonymously tell authorities exactly where to look, they have the legal right to investigate." That night, William's lawyer called in panic. "William, we have a problem." The audit uncovered irregularities, but worse, Yamamoto received an anonymous dossier about Sterling Industries' labor practices. "They want an urgent meeting before finalizing the merger." William froze. The $400 million deal he had spent 5 years building was collapsing, and for the first time in his life, he felt a real fear that he had underestimated the wrong person. The next day at Grandview, Victoria's mother Linda was still wearing her restaurant uniform, trying to stay focused on her shift, unaware of the storm brewing in William Sterling's world. "Honey, you've been quiet lately," Linda said softly, but before Victoria could answer, the manager appeared nervously and warned that Sterling had booked a table for an important dinner with Japanese investors and had specifically requested that Victoria not be present. Victoria smiled calmly, promising her mother she would go to the library, though in reality, she had other plans. At 8:30 p.m., using a payphone, she sent an anonymous message to a number linked to Yamamoto Corporation, advising them to observe Sterling's behavior at 9 o'clock that night, because a demonstration was worth 1,000 reports. As William prepared for the most important dinner of his career, straightening his tie and reviewing his documents, he had no idea that a 12-year-old girl had set a flawless mathematical trap. Victoria closed her notebook and whispered to herself that Phase 1 of Project Balance was complete. All the variables were aligned, and soon Sterling would react exactly as her calculations predicted, by amplifying his arrogance until it destroyed him. At 9 o'clock, William greeted Mr. Yamamoto and his delegation with confidence, unaware of the discreet men with recording devices seated nearby. Yamamoto began politely but seriously, saying they had concerns to clarify. William laughed dismissively and assured them they could ask anything, but when Linda approached with a tray of drinks, his irritation burst forth. "You still work here?" he sneered loudly. "I thought people like you knew their place." The Japanese table fell into silence, and William pressed further, mocking Linda's daughter as that black child who thinks she's so smart, boasting that she no longer disturbed his customers. Yamamoto interrupted gently to ask how William treated his employees, and William, misinterpreting curiosity for admiration, bragged that he enforced necessary firmness, especially on people who don't understand natural hierarchies, claiming it was the secret to building a $2 billion empire. The more questions Yamamoto posed, the more William revealed his prejudice, convinced he was impressing them, while across the street Victoria, hidden at the library window, watched the scene unfold on her borrowed phone as live streams of the dinner went viral. Notifications buzzed in her hand, thousands of views, the hashtag #SterlingRacist trending globally, as William's phone rang nonstop with desperate calls from his press secretary, lawyer, and accountant warning him to escape. But it was too late. Mr. Yamamoto rose with icy calm, declaring that his corporation upheld strict values of diversity and respect, and that the agreement was definitively terminated. William's face paled as he tried to explain, but the damage was irreversible, and for the first time he realized that underestimating a 12-year-old girl had become the most catastrophic mistake of his billionaire life. But the Japanese were already leaving, followed by the stares of the entire restaurant that had witnessed the public humiliation. William's phone rang again. It was the chairman of Sterling Industries coldly informing him, "William, you're fired. The board meets tomorrow to choose your replacement. Security is already on its way to your home to collect company equipment." As William slumped in his chair, Linda quietly approached to collect the empty glasses and, with calm precision, said, "You know, Mr. Sterling, my daughter Victoria has an interesting theory about people like you. She says arrogance is just ignorance disguised as power." William's face twisted with horror as he realized, it was you, a 12-year-old. Linda's smile carried both maternal pride and quiet triumph. "Victoria isn't just any child," she replied. "She understands that true intelligence lies in letting people reveal exactly who they are when they feel safe in their own superiority." As William Sterling watched his $2 billion empire collapse in real time through endless notifications on his phone, he finally grasped the unbearable truth. He had been destroyed with surgical precision by a girl who turned his arrogance into the sharpest weapon against him. Yet Victoria's revenge was only beginning, because mathematical prodigies know that solving equations means eliminating every negative variable from the system. 6 months later, Victoria Thompson sat in an MIT office signing her acceptance letter to the Special Applied Mathematics program with a full scholarship, becoming the youngest student in the university's history at just 13. "Your recommendation letter from Yamamoto Corporation was exceptional," the director of admissions remarked, praising her for applying mathematical theory in social contexts with measurable results. Victoria smiled. Yamamoto had not only canceled their agreement with Sterling but also created a scholarship fund in her name to support prodigies from underprivileged communities. Meanwhile, William lived in a small apartment, scraping by as a freelance consultant after every reputable firm rejected him, while the viral video of his racist outburst, watched 12 million times, was now taught in business schools as a case study in career self-destruction. Linda had risen as director of human resources for Yamamoto's U.S. restaurant chain, managing 3 locations with dignity that had impressed the Japanese delegation from the start. "You knew this would happen?" Linda asked her daughter during a visit to the MIT campus. "I didn't know," Victoria admitted with honesty, "but I calculated the probability. People like William Sterling always reveal who they are when they feel superior. I only created the right environment for it to happen in front of the right people." On her last day before moving to Boston, Victoria discovered a letter in her locker from an 8-year-old classmate. "Thank you for showing me that being smart is not something we should hide." Victoria folded it carefully, realizing the true lesson was never about revenge, but about proving that real intelligence always finds a way. A week later, William Sterling choked on his coffee as he saw the headline, "13-year-old prodigy develops algorithm to prevent discrimination in hiring." The photo showed Victoria receiving an international award for social innovation, and the ultimate irony was that her algorithm was already being implemented in companies worldwide, including Sterling's former suppliers. Victoria Thompson had transformed a billionaire's arrogance into the foundation of her own rise, proving that revenge is not about destroying those who harm you, but about building something so brilliant that it renders their cruelty irrelevant. Mathematics had spoken. Prejudice is only ignorance disguised as power, and true intelligence will always find an equation to win.